And we are live. Hello, this is Ruben from the Connection Loop podcast. Today I have with me Collin Stewart, and there's three things, actually there's four things that we're going to talk about in this podcast, which I am super passionate about. Number one is music, because we're both musicians. Number two is this idea of customer discovery. Number three is the idea of a GTM, a go-to market strategy. And then lastly, it's the idea of creating predictable revenue. And in fact, he is the most qualified person to talk about predictable revenue because he's the CEO of Predictable Revenue. In fact, you should check out his website, predictablerevenue.com. Collin Stewart, lay it on us, give us a short bio, and bring us into your world.
Well, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah.
My name's Collin. I used to play in a band a long time ago. Then I decided, I think I realized that I have skills that are more than just music, meaning I like playing guitar, but I'm not that good, at least compared to like the professionals that we were playing with or playing adjacent to. So I really enjoyed that side. I still got my guitar over here, but the most relevant piece is probably the last 20 years of professional experience. I spent 10 years as an AE where I was roughly one of the first salespeople hired for, in a company, and going 0 to 1 million, or like 1 to 10 million. Those were the kind of two revenue ranges where I spent a bunch of time playing in. Then the last 10 years I was basically the nerdy sales guy at the office that knew how to work Salesforce or Capsule or Sugar CRM or any of the ones that we're working with. And so I always got pulled into those projects. And so 10 years ago, I was like, you know what? Sucks. CRM is kind of awful. And Salesforce was good, but it wasn't a tool for salespeople. And that really annoyed me. And so I wanted to build a sales tool for salespeople, or a CRM that was built for salespeople. So I tried to build a CRM company. Turns out that was a bad idea. But along the way, I came across this book called Predictable Revenue, emailed the guy, was just annoyingly curious, as I usually am. Eventually, he's like, hey, we should merge. So in 2014, I brought the company that I was building in together with Aaron, and we built Predictable Revenue.
Nice. So what is it about the idea of predictability that you gravitated towards? Why that name? Why the idea? What did it look like before that? What was the unpredictable fiasco that you might have found yourself in?
I think there's a couple things that I'd say every account exec or sales manager or sales leader struggles with. If you have full stack account executives. So if you are full stack, full cycle, if you're prospecting, closing, and managing accounts, my quarterly or monthly performance looked like a sine wave. I'd have a great month, and then I'd have a terrible month, and I'd have a great month, and I'd have a terrible month. And I think what was most attractive to predictable revenue, about the idea of predictable revenue, was the specializing the sales roles element, where let's get a prospector or a sales development rep, business development rep, et cetera, in to basically take that away and remove the sine wave. Because when it comes down to it, the formula for predictable revenue, consistent top of funnel, consistent process through the funnel equals predictable revenue. And I'd probably add on the caveat, and that was when we first started, I'd probably add on the caveat that the first element of that formula is product market fit. And so if you're taking your top of funnel efforts, your sales process efforts, and you're multiplying that by the strength of your product market fit, that is definitely something that we've seen and experienced along the way. We've had a lot of chances to work with some pretty cool companies, and some companies that were not so fast followers of those pretty cool companies. And the contrasting results are pretty, make it pretty obvious what strength of product market fit and timing and all that look like.
Well, it's interesting because, to connect and to tie in the idea of a musical band, right, with its dynamics and with its synergy, and everyone has a different role. My first instrument is actually the drums, so I'm very familiar with this idea of setting the framework, the infrastructure, the beat, if you will. And I sort of still am drumming every single day of my job. I'm sort of laying the framework, and other people have the stage, the area in front of me to go do louder and more colorful and melodic and maybe memorable things. So what would you say is the synergy that's required from a team perspective to really operate like that well-oiled band?
Oh, I mean, there's so many, the very broad question. And learning that you're a drummer, it just adds so much context. You now make sense to me. I'm like, this guy, there's something about him that I just can't place. I'm like, oh, he's a drummer. No, it all makes sense. I mean that in the meanest possible way.
That's funny.
I remember
There's probably a Spinal Tap joke somewhere in there.
oh yeah, 100%. It's there, but don't even look at it. When we found the drummer to our band, we put like job postings up. Or not like a job posting, but like we went to all the music studios and all the, instrument stores and stuff like that. We put up this like wanted ad, and this guy called us, and he had a car, a job, and his own kit. And I was like, are you sure you're a drummer?
Was he on time?
He was so on time. He was early for everything. He was early.
Was his tempo on time?
Oh, more than mine was.
Nice.
He bought me a metronome once. That's how bad I was. He's like, if you don't play with this, I'm not going to play with you.
That's funny.
Yeah. So in terms of like the metronome, or like how this kind of connects to the sales world, I mean, I think when you look at a sales team, they're executing a strategy, right? Like if you look at like an individual AE, and I think so much of my frustration as an AE back in the day was I'm stuck selling this product in this market that somebody else has decided to sell into. And you're going to market, and you're either a good salesperson or you're not a good salesperson based on, what you're closing. But that's not exactly true. I had a number of opportunities, let's say, that I brought to the company. I generated millions of dollars in pipeline for this one company that I worked for. I won't say the name because it wasn't, I really loved the people there. And I just didn't feel like I was working my ass off, and I didn't generate any revenue, any value for this one particular market. And I feel like I was hustling. I brought millions in pipeline. We closed nothing. And it wasn't because I was a bad salesperson. It was because our position in that market, these are just deals that we couldn't win. It came down to numbers and math, and we had massive competitors that could operate on a zero margin or negative margin and make the deal up in the service. And this experience really stuck with me, because as a salesperson, you're kind of, depending on the role, you're kind of stuck selling the strategy of the sales leader and of the CEO. And when it comes down to like where I'm going with this rant is, I think the number one thing that I've seen a lot of founders, CEOs, skip out on is proper customer development. The running predictable revenue, we've probably worked with 700, 800 companies over the last couple of years, like as customers over the last few years. And the number of companies that will come in, say, hey, we want to buy some sales development, and just sprinkle it all over our pipeline. We're like, great. Okay. So who is your best customer? Like, who should we be going after? And they're like, oh, no, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? If you don't tell us exactly who, the people that we need to go after, like, how are we supposed to book meetings that turn to a pipeline, that turn to revenue? And so in a lot of these engagements, we end up with a really poorly defined ideal customer profile. And, we work through, and we've got a really strong process for kind of bringing that. But if there's no product market fit to be found, you're multiplying your entire sales strategy and your entire sales efforts by that product market fit. And the reason I say it's the number one thing that people don't invest in is because it's that first part of the formula. If you're doing a bad job there, maybe not even a bad job, if you're not doing an excellent job, say you're doing a 50% job, everybody's efforts downstream are multiplied by 50%, right? So you're going to make 100 cold calls. Okay, now you need to make 200 cold calls, right? Just to hit the same numbers. Your cost to acquire a customer is going to be so much higher. Your risk of failure in trying to open up a new market is going to be so much greater because you don't have really strong product market fit.
Well, this idea of knowing the customer, I think it starts actually with knowing thyself, because if you know thyself, which is who you are as a leader, what your company offers, where you sort of fit in this product market fit world, what's this addressable market that we can actually approach, and how much of it can we capture? How do we compare to our competitors? How do we differentiate ourselves? Like, knowing this information and then aligning it with the customer, it's really one of the hardest things to do. And it's funny because I was just thinking about when was the last time you've ever heard of a band saying, hey, what do our listeners, what would they like to listen to? Why don't we make music that they would like to listen to. Most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's, hey, I'm feeling art, I'm feeling pain, I'm feeling, some emotion, and I want to share it. How can we as business leaders, as sales leaders, and maybe even as musicians, how can we do a better job to connect to ourselves, and then also, know that customer?
Oh, I mean, it's such a perfect analogy because you can almost I have no experience in the music industry other than like probably the most I ever got paid was like a couple $100 bar tab for
Yeah.
my musical efforts. Um, but I would almost guarantee that there is somebody. If you look at Taylor Swift, yes, she's an artist, and yes, she probably has control, like the most control over what she writes. And so maybe she's not a great example, but I'd say everybody in between Taylor Swift, there probably is some element of what does the audience want? How do we make sure that we keep this business enterprise going? Because as much as you are an artist, you're also a business. And I think any good business, the first thing you're thinking about is your customer. And I think to go back to like our experience, we just got lucky, in the band that I was in, we just got lucky that we happened to know a couple of blues bands or blues bars and that would just like come in and let us play. And so we kind of had an idea of, we followed this one band called Brick House and we knew that those guys. And so they would get us in to like open for them or like the open mic nights at the same place that they played at. So we kind of had the market was sitting there. We knew that there was a market for this type of music. And it just happened to be lucky that we wanted to make that type of music. But when you think about like when we first formed the band, assuming we didn't know Brick House, we didn't know where the blues bars were, we didn't know what kind of music, we just kind of sat down and said, okay, we want to make this kind of music. And like, who cares what people want to listen to? That was the process of creation. And I think founders carry that in. But what we forget is that, yes, there is an element of like when you're starting a company, there's an element of the art, there's an element of science, but there's less art and there's more revenue. Like the reason you start a company is to help people make progress in the world, and that progress is funded by them saying, yeah, good job, here's some money. And if you are not there in service of customers that exist and that exist, then like you can't ask 30 people plus investors to show up and say, hey, let's try and serve this mythical customer. Which you kind of can if you're an artist. If you're a musician, you can play the music you want. It's a hobby. If you want to get good, if you want to be, the other musicians that we played with or that we saw, they were playing covers because they knew their audience. Their audience wanted to hear, covers from this genre. They wanted to hear Stevie Ray Vaughan. They wanted to hear Eric Clapton. They wanted to hear Billy Preston. And so they would play these covers because they knew their customer. Those bands, I was going to say guys, but I think there's a couple women in the bands. So those bands, they really knew their audience and they played what they wanted. They played what the audience wanted. They didn't always play their own songs, their own originals. They played covers because that's what people wanted to pay for. And I think that's the difference of like when you are a business versus a passion project, that's the kind of, I guess maybe one of the differences and maybe one of the reasons why it's, you see like entrepreneurs that really care about their company and, their passion is their work. And that's a real fortunate thing. If your passion is your work and it just happens to line up with exactly what other people find valuable. But I think there's maybe a step missing that some of us don't consider when we're trying to build a company.
Well, I love how you said that. And it reminds me of something that someone once told me, which is they said, if you want to be successful, do it for them. Don't do it for yourself. And I'll repeat that. If you want to be successful, do it for them, not for yourself. It becomes yourself when you get the success and when you get the proof of concept and the traction and the product market fit and the go-to market fit. Those things actually, that's the reward, because there's financial rewards, that come with that when you have that level of success. So I think it's a really good, reminder for all of us to do exactly what you're talking about, which is to go on that journey, and to dig deep, because I think there's going to be some great wisdom if we actually try to really truly connect with our customers and what they're suffering from and what they want to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
let's get into this idea of a strategy and a path for predictable revenue. The way that I connect to predictable revenue is it's really through three metrics. Number one is monthly recurring revenue. You know, CEO of a SaaS company, you're going to hear that over and over again, monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue. That's just how we operate. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is this idea of, you know, what is our churn? How many customers end up leaving us after some amount of time, right? And there's healthy numbers and there's unhealthy numbers. And then I would say this third idea is this idea of the social coefficient. For every customer that I acquire, how many additional customers can I get? This is just a simple way to understand, you know, word of mouth marketing, referral marketing. Guide us on a path on creating a strategy, because what we talked about, I think, is a customer discovery strategy, a product market fit strategy, a go-to market fit strategy, and now how do we tie this into a predictable revenue strategy?
Yeah, and I think there's the Mark Robert's. He wrote. He's got a. I can't remember the name of the talk. It's something about like the science of reigniting growth, and he wrote that or did that presentation at SaaStr in 2019, I think. I might be off by a year. And he offered the idea of there are different phases in a company's life, and the first one is product market fit. And he offered some really awesome ideas for tracking leading indicators of product market fit. I love that core idea. But the thing that really resonated with me is product market fit first, go to market fit second. And I think I love his like leading indicators of like within the product. I think there's even one step further, because that assumes people are using the product, right? And so I think what is the first gate to like the earliest signs of product market fit? I like to go back to Dave McClure's Pirate metrics. And those are acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. I'll walk you through what I mean by those in a second here. But I just want to credit to Dave McClure from 500 Startups for this.
500 Startups, yeah.
Yeah. So the very first one, if you're thinking about quantifying product market fit, acquisition, right? When I'm talking to somebody, if I do a customer development interview and at the end I say, hey, you know, assuming this person is the right persona and they do have some pain, hey, I'm working on this thing. We've got an early crappy version. Do you want to try it out? If they say yes, step one. If they say yes and they try it out, so they say yes to your offer on that call, you send them a link, you say, hey, sign up here or do this thing. Maybe it's pay this. And they actually do that. Step two, activation. You've activated some of that revenue. Step three is after they activate it, do they still use the product? And then I skip over revenue because we're talking early product market fit. And then I go to referral. And if they continue, so they say yes to the product, they actually sign up or pay, they keep using the product, and then you love it so much that they tell their friends. That is the sort of happy customer loop that you get in the early stages of product market fit. I've lived this twice, and it feels like the feeling of, you know, starting a startup is like pushing a giant boulder up a hill. And if you stop working for a second, that boulder is going to roll back and crush you and crush everybody behind you. Everybody behind you will be the company or the rest of the people on the team. But the feeling of product market fit is that boulder starts to roll down and now you're chasing the boulder and just trying not to fall over. And I felt it twice, and it felt like what it looked like was we'll ignore the whole CRM thing. And I was trying to start a CRM company, and I came back to the team. I said, listen, I'm so sorry. We built a ton of stuff that nobody's ever going to pay for or use. That's on me. Before I ask you to write another line of code, I'm going to find 5 paying customers for whatever we're doing. And the first thing that we validate that has 5 paying customers, we'll start working on that. And I ran some customer development interviews. I did 5 and I got 7 customers. And I went back to my co-founder. I was like, hey, I think there might be something here, because I sat in on those 5 meetings and people were like stopping me halfway through. Like, wait, you're actually working on this? Like you could do this? And I was like, well, hey, let me get through the interview first, but like, I'll tell you at the end. They're like, no, you're working on X, Y, Z. And I'm like, yes. Okay. And then they were pulling it out of me. You could feel like I'm getting excited about it because I'm thinking back to those memories. And like, out of 5 interviews, 2 of them bullied me into, no, you got to take my friend on. I know they're struggling with this as well. And so I think there's an argument to be made that is product market fit plus like really, really strong market timing. And so when I think back to like, how does this fit into product market fit, go to market fit, This is, I think, the earliest measure of, if you have this is strong product market fit. The thing I hear from a lot of customers, or that a lot of people come to me and they ask is, Collin, how do I find my first 10 customers? Like, customer development interviews. Like, oh, well, I did 100 customer development interviews. It's like, great. And how many of them said yes to what you want to do or what you're working on? Oh, we didn't ask them that. It's like, well, you just talked to 100 people. You know intimately about, if you did it right, you know intimately exactly what they're looking for. Why didn't any of them say yes? Oh, we didn't ask. It's like, okay, well, go back, find an offer that's 1/20th of what you're going to charge, and go ask them if they pay for it. But the clearest indication is, if you went and did 200 interviews and not one of them said, oh, we have to buy this, you probably don't have product market fit. And I think this is like an area where I have lied to myself about how strong of product market fit I had. I wasn't willing to admit that we didn't have product market fit. And I've had this conversation with founders hundreds of times, where they're like, oh no, I have product market fit and I have this, I have that, I have that. And they're like, okay, well, how many interviews did you do? How many of them bullied you into like letting them take their friends on? How many referrals? Like, if you have 10 customers and you're doing a phenomenal job in creating something new that they could never solve before, they're going to know other people that have that same problem. And not everybody is going to be in a B2B SaaS. And so this isn't totally, I'll add the asterisk that this was my experience and this isn't, categorically the only way. I'm just trying to share, this is what it was like for me. It happened 2 times, once on the services side, once with the product side. And with the product side, we went 0 to 60K monthly recurring revenue in 2 months. So like this has been my experience. And then when I color that with, for the last 10 years, I mean, we're a services business now, and it's a totally different story of how 0 to 60K monthly in software revenue, and now we're a services business, is a topic for another podcast. But we've had an opportunity to work with 700 or 800 companies on building their first sales development team. And the number of companies that I see skipping over the customer research step or customer development step, where they are maybe not being honest with themselves or us about the strength of their product market fit, and how, or what they know about their customers. And I'm not saying this to throw all of our customers under the bus and say, oh, we work with the worst companies. We work with some amazing and some great companies. And it is a really, really hard thing. And, before I figured this out, I spent 2 years with 0 salary doing this, making the same mistakes. So I say this without judgment or criticism or, looking down on anybody. Like, it's a really hard thing. So,
well, I think that you're no stranger to difficult things. In fact, one of the things that I learned on your LinkedIn account that we actually have in common is that we're both martial artists. So I know that you practice kickboxing. I actually practice Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's method, sort of a hybrid of kung fu and a couple of other things. What can you sort of guide us in terms of what you've learned, from martial arts, in terms of perseverance, in terms of adapting, in terms of making the best out of any situation, and not going in with the situation to fight, rather to have peace?
I mean, maybe kickboxing is different from Bruce Lee's martial arts, but I think the biggest learning from it has been amateur fight night in Vancouver means a bunch of guys in a dojo, 50% body, 2% to the head. Amateur fight night in Australia means televised on local TV. We're selling tickets. Collin's going to get his ass kicked. Which actually happened. I do have a amateur record of 0-1 accidentally in sport kickboxing in Australia. Hopefully you can't find the video anywhere.
Nice.
Not good.
As long as it wasn't a kangaroo, you're good.
No. That would have been a different story. I think it's, the cheesy answer is balance. But honestly, I think the biggest thing came from my sensei when I was learning kickboxing. And it was an idea that was counterintuitive, that kind of broke my brain a little bit until you kind of realized it. It was like learning how to dodge a punch, right? Most people back up like this. But if the punch is coming towards you, let's just assume there's punching straight at you, and you back away, you're still in the line of fire. But if you lean in, like the proper way is to lean in and forward. So
Yeah.
you're moving forward, you're keeping eye contact and or keeping, situational awareness. You lean in and forward, but just enough out of the way. Now you've dodged it and you're in a much better position
Mm.
to counterattack. And I
Yeah.
think the analogy holds with entrepreneurship, and it does kind of feel like somebody's trying to constantly punch you in the face and kill the company, or the company's trying to kill itself. Every week, month, quarter, it gets less and less. And I think just the idea of consistently leaning in as opposed to like recoiling, it's always
Mm.
been a great reminder anytime. There's always that fear of like, oh shit, something's trying to punch me in the face. And it's just a good reminder of like, yeah, you're strong. This is the way. Just eye contact, head up, lean forward,
Mm.
get out of the way, and then come back at it. Because it's not always about the strength of the punch. Sometimes it's just about the points and keep the points up. And like they hit you, you hit them back. They hit you, you hit them back.
Yeah, I really connect to this idea. In my learnings, we actually take a lot from Tai Chi and Qigong, and this idea of understanding energy and how energy flows.
Mhm.
In Taoism, they talk about how, and Bruce Lee talks about this a lot. In fact, there's a famous interview where he talks about, the idea of being water. Water can crash, water can flow. If it's in a cup, it becomes the cup. Water takes on so many things. Ultimately, be like water, right? And that's just this
Mhm.
idea of adapting. So when this energy comes towards you, you can lean away from it or you can lean in, to your point. And I think that, one of my biggest learnings is actually to, when there's energy out there, sometimes you don't want to fight it. You want to actually become that energy, because why
Mhm.
have an opposing force to an energy when you can, amplify it if you sort of add to it? Now, obviously, you don't want to, sacrifice morality or sacrifice, an alignment with your own personal goals. But a lot of the times, if our customers are saying, I really want this, Collin, I don't want a CRM. I actually really want this to help me get predictable revenue. You lean in, and that's exactly what you did. So, huge kudos to you to understanding that when this energy came towards you, these customers that are bullying you to allow them to hire you, you listened, and you didn't let your ego take over. So,
I
and hey,
eventually I
yeah,
eventually listened because there was about a 2-year period where
right,
I didn't listen at all.
yeah.
It might have even been 3
Well, I'm
years if
sure it
I'm
helps,
totally
when
honest.
they have a check in hand and they say, "Here you go."
I remember one guy, and it was an interview. Like, so this person is doing me a favor. He's a VP of sales, and I wish I could track it down. I remember roughly what his LinkedIn profile looks like. But we got in a would have been a fist fight if it was in person, but we were like arguing about
Mm.
Salesforce. And he's like, why won't you just build this into Salesforce? If you did that, I would give you money. And this is like how much of an idiot I was being. I was arguing with him. And he was like, I would like to give you some money. This sounds cool. And I was like, no, you're wrong. You're thinking about the wrong way. I was like, oh, I wish I could go back and just like look at that guy and be like, God, you're such an idiot. And just
Mm.
eat some popcorn and be like, look at this moron. I wish that
Yeah,
was on video.
yeah. Well, hey, listen,
Yeah.
we're all here, we're all learning, we're all going through the journey. I would love to learn where people can find you online, LinkedIn, your website. Share us some socials. I'll get some screen sharing here.
Yeah, I think the best place, I mean, if you're if you're not sick of listening to me talk, you can go check out the podcast. We've got some great interviews. I think yours truly might be on there shortly.
Mm.
You can follow us on LinkedIn. We've just started a newsletter on LinkedIn where we share out some of the best kind of snippets from the podcast over the last week. And so
Nice.
that's coming out. I think it's weekly. And yeah, so you can check us out. Follow us on LinkedIn. We've also got the link tree link to find us to find our podcast. We're on YouTube if you want to watch us. We're on Spotify, Apple, et cetera, et cetera. If you're like, hey, I'm looking to buy some sales development, or you're trying to hire a sales development rep or build a sales development team, you can check out Predictable Revenue or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat. I love working with like early founders on product market fit stuff or building their first sales team. That's spent a lot of time doing it, and fortunately that's why I started this company. Is that was the sweet spot for me. It's really fun to, I don't know, to be that person that can help an entrepreneur kind of break through that roadblock and get their product to market. That sort of product market fit's really hard, and then go to market fit or distribution is insanely hard. So
Nice. Well, you know what? If it could all be as fun as playing music, the world would go around much more seamlessly. But in fact, it can be. Maybe it's just about going through the process. It's about understanding energy. It's about understanding thyself, understanding thy customers, and ultimately where you sort of fit into this and how it can all fit together. Collin, I wanted to thank you for your time on the Connection Loop podcast. I encourage folks to check you out on LinkedIn, on YouTube. PredictableRevenue.com is your website. There's you can book a discovery call right on the site. And I loved booking those discovery calls because it's sort of like a consultation. You get to speak to an expert and ask really engaging questions. So I would encourage people to not be afraid to book those discovery calls. Don't think of it as a salesperson that's going to come hunt you down. Think of it actually as a consultant where you can ask very difficult questions. In fact, if you preemptively ask those questions, who knows what that person will go do to get the research to convey the information to you and actually really help you solve your problems. Because, in this case, a company like Predictable Revenue might be a perfect fit for you. So once again, Collin, thank you so much. Any closing notes here?
No. If you're doing those discovery calls, if you're interested, you're going to be chatting with, likely to be chatting with a guy named Pete, who used to be an SDR with PR. Now he's an incredible account exec for us. So he's got a ton of great experience. If you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, then I'm also happy to have a chat. And just, if you think you're too early, I can point you in the direction of some good content, or you can find me on OnlyFans. And I'll throw the link to you shortly.
Nice. And there is a podcast where I'm actually on the Predictable Revenue podcast, and I encourage. Should we direct people to the YouTube link for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Predictable Revenue in YouTube, and that's Predictable Revenue is the YouTube social handle. So I encourage you guys to subscribe to that channel and check out that episode with me and Collin. Thanks so much, Collin.
Awesome.
Stick around for some production notes. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Rob. Ruben.